Hey, what's up, good people? It's Jay Ray, the co host of Q Points, and I wanted to come to you because there are two really important ways that you can support our show. One is by subscribing to it wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. Q Points is pretty much everywhere. The other thing that you can do is you can visit us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on Podchaser, and you can leave us a star rating. Please rate us 5 stars because you know you love Q Points. And on Apple Podcasts and on Podchaser, you can actually leave us a written review. It's not required, but it really does help to spread the word about the show, and it helps people to discover it as they're looking for new podcasts to listen to. We're always appreciative of you supporting Q Points. We thank you so much for all that you've done for us so far, and enjoy the show.
Penny girl, it's Saturday, and you know what that means.
It's family fun day all day. Woohoo!
What's Poppin' Penny? A magical podcast for kids 3 and over and their families.
What's Poppin' Penny? She's a little girl, brown skin and curly hair, living life without a care, yeah.
Greetings and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of Q Points Podcast. I am DJ Sir Daniel.
And my name is Jay Ray, sometimes known by my government as Johnny Ray Cornegay III. What's happening, people? I'm turning down my mic because it's doing a lot.
Well, okay. And I want to welcome everybody again and say Q Points Podcast is the podcast that's dropping the needle on Black music history. And also to let you know that today's episode of Q Points is brought to you by the letter Q. Q stands for quality programming, co-hosts, and of course, products. Q Points, we have intentionally aligned ourselves as not only an entertainment podcast, but a learning podcast as well. This particular episode, listener, of Q Points is about learning and about an institution that has rooted itself in the empowerment, the growth and development of our children, the children in the United States, around the world, actually, because Sesame Street is a global phenomenon, and to this day, that is still affecting children around the world. And this episode couldn't come around at a better time, J Ray, because as you and I were talking before we started recording, our children are oh my God, they are at such a high risk these days. They are adultified, they are parentified, and they are full of anxiety because in this day and age, you can't go to school or stand at the school's bus stop without the fear of getting shot at, which is something that just recently happened in Philadelphia.
Absolutely. It has been rough. Honestly, y'all, yesterday, I didn't know what to say. And you're right, Sir Daniel. This is an apropos time for us to have this conversation about Sesame Street because there are lessons in Sesame Street that I couldn't have imagined this, right? These were young people that were shot, standing, waiting for the bus to come. When the folks were shooting, the bus was there, and there were people not involved in any of this who were also at risk of being shot. None of those people were, but the young people were shot. It's just a lot, y'all. And so sending love out to those families of those young people. But in Philly leading up to that, that was the 4th shooting in as many days.
Yeah. And it's all too familiar. It's all too it's happening too often from schools and now bus stops. And that's why this episode is so important, because we feel like there's some things, some lessons that the kids aren't receiving, or even the adults could probably do with a good refresher course from Sesame Street. And you're probably wondering, so I thought this was like a show about, Black music and, you
It
know,
is.
and hip hop and whatnot, and dropping the needle on Black music history. Well, guess what? Sesame Street is
Black.
both. Sesame
Exactly.
Street is super Black. It is Black history, right? And J Ray's about to school us on that. And it is chock full of musical performances by a lot of your faves.
Yeah.
So J Ray, let's I know J Ray is our resident historian, so please run it down on the super quick Black history facts of Sesame Street.
Yeah, y'all. So Sir Daniel is absolutely right. Sesame Street in our lives is one of those things that we could look to see a reflection of ourselves, and that's by design. So I want to run through some interesting facts about the history of Sesame Street, specifically from its Black roots. But here we go. So Sesame Street premiered on November 10th of 1969. So this year is Sesame Street is 55 years old. Sesame Street is grown.
Yes. Almost retirement age.
Almost retirement age, right? So what's interesting about Sesame Street is it was so groundbreaking that it inspired other shows. So we talked about another show that was inspired by Sesame Street last year when it was celebrating 50, Schoolhouse Rock, of course. So if you've never seen that show, go and watch our Schoolhouse Rock show because it's totally cool, which is also Black history too. So Sesame Street was co-created by a man named Lloyd Morissette, who was a psychologist. The idea of Sesame Street was brought to him by Joan Gance Cooney. And so Joan and Lloyd worked together to kind of get the funding to be able to do Sesame Street. So what was really cool about Sesame Street is you had this combination of the adults and the children and the Muppets, right? So it used Jim Henson's Muppets as well as part of Sesame Street. And that's one of the things that made the show really dynamic is you had these Muppets interacting with the adults and the children. So one of the things that made Sesame Street so groundbreaking, Sir Daniel, and I didn't realize this, is it was a show that it used music to teach children in a way that wasn't really done before Sesame Street. Of course, music was used in kids' programming, but what Sesame Street did and what their composers did was create songs that really brought the lessons into them. And what's really interesting about that is that's where the Black history kind of comes in. So in a 1998 interview, this is from the Smithsonian Magazine, this is available online, Joan Gance Cooney said that she had produced a Harlem preschool program documentary. That program eventually became Head Start, what we now know as Head Start today, right? Mm-hmm. But what that did for her is, quote, it led her to, quote, become absolutely involved intellectually and spiritually with the civil rights movement and with the educational deficit that poverty created, right? So Joan Gance Cooney's goal was to combat the challenges that come with poverty, in particular as it was affecting young Black folks, young folks of color, led her to kind of come up with this idea with Lloyd for Sesame Street. And Harlem, interestingly enough, I did not know this. Harlem, Sesame Street was kind of, the idea of Sesame Street was built around the community of Harlem. It makes perfect sense. When I read it, I was like, oh, I get it now. So yes, Harlem served as like the inspiration for how Sesame Street was constructed, right? So, and if y'all don't know, Sesame Street is a fictional street in New York City, and the address of Sesame Street is 123 Sesame Street. It's a great address, right? So, part of the unspoken curriculum of Sesame Street was to show depictions of Black folks in a positive light on television. Of course, they couldn't say that they were doing this, right? But they were doing it just by the work. One of the examples I wanted to pull out, I have 2 points I want to make before we jump into the discussion. So Susan, who was one of the hosts, there was 2 hosts that I remember as a kid. There was Susan and there was Gordon. And then I think Maria came late. Maria was around.
And Luis.
And Luis. So these was our people, right? As kids, you knew these folks, right?
And Mr. Hooper.
And Mr. Hooper. Yeah. Absolutely. So Susan of these, Gordon and Susan, she had a husband named Peter. So here's what Peter did. Peter, according to the Smithsonian, Peter worked at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And he helped to provide the musical talent for the first show. So they brought in a 16-member youth ensemble. Get into this name. The youth ensemble was called Listen My Brother. And they brought them in for the Sesame Street pilot. Check this out, Sir Daniel. Fronting the group, which would make appearances in the first season of Sesame Street, were 3 vocalists. Luther Vandross, who of course is Luther Vandross. I don't have to explain who that is.
You don't have to explain who that is.
Robin Clark, who would also go on to sing with David Bowie. So that means Robin and Luther went on to sing with David Bowie. And Fonzie Thornton. Fonzie Thornton would form Chic with Nile Rodgers.
Wow.
Right. Isn't that crazy? So they were part of this, the first group of performers in that first season, 1969, included 1, Luther Vandross, Robin Clark, and Fonzie Thornton. One more thing, and then we could talk about this because it's amazing. So in 1972, this couldn't happen in 2024. So I don't know how they pulled this off in 1972. Remember I talked about kind of the secret, the unspoken a curriculum was to show Black folks on TV. And Nina Simone came to Sesame Street, sat on the stoop with 4 young Black children and sang Young, Gifted, and Black at 123 Sesame Street.
Look at that.
Black history.
Black history, y'all. We told you. Can you imagine at the very foundation of Sesame Street are 3 individuals that basically are the reason for a lot of the music that is built our lives, that our lives are built around? Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for those facts, which you can always get here on Q Points, because that's just what we do. What we say, dropping the needle on Black music history. And so as we get into the discussion about Sesame Street, J. Ray, and we talk about, you mentioned about the needs that it fulfills in a young person's life. And I just think about my own life as a child and just how I remember Sesame Street was, I could kind of tell what time of day it was. Because when I was in nursery school at Hanson Place, Seventh-day Adventist School in Brooklyn, I knew that it was getting close to it was after nap time, and it meant that soon we were getting ready to go home. And so they would turn on Sesame Street, and we would gather as a classroom to sit and watch Sesame Street. And I just remember being gleeful and singing as a group with my classmates the theme song, How to Get to Sesame Street, and just being enthralled by seeing our friends. These became our friends each and every day that we would watch them. The adults, the Muppets. And the thing about Sesame Street, it, even as a little person, you felt seen as a whole person when you would watch Sesame Street. And that is the feeling because it still lives within me, that I took away watching Sesame Street as a child. Do you have any recollections or feelings around Sesame Street that you can pull on, Jerry?
Yeah, Sesame Street is one of those things. And for y'all in the chat also, what needs did Sesame Street fill? What memories do you have of Sesame Street? Let us know, because we definitely want to know. I remember being able to watch young people that looked like me on TV. And because I was so connected to music, it was also easy to retain the lessons. So I think the funny thing about Sesame Street is I don't have a specific memory like you, but I remember the colors. I remember sitting and watching Big Bird. I remember hearing Grover's voice. I remember Oscar coming up out of that trash can. It was all so present for me. And I know that there are lessons that were in Sesame Street that I still just kind of carry. So when I go back and I watch some of the musical performances, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that I would understand that. You know what I'm saying? And I probably came from just watching Sesame Street and having those lessons just kind of bestowed upon me. So yes, it was important. It was important.
Very important. And shout out to PBS, for laying that groundwork, or having that platform specifically for educational program, and blocking out that much time for young people, for children specifically, because one of my fond memories is that, it wasn't just Sesame Street. We also got, it was like a 1-2-3 punch. We got Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Yep. And then for the older kids, we had Electric Company right after that. Hey, you guys, where we saw, what is his name? The actor,
who?
It just slipped my mind that quick. Morgan
Freeman.
Morgan Freeman and Rita Moreno. A lot of people came.
Yeah.
Yep, they were on Electric Company. And there was a lot of children's. We were talking about 3-2-1 Contact, and especially if you were from the Northeast, there was Romper Room, Wonderama, a lot of great New Zoo Review. What's the one that you talked about that you remember fondly?
Oh, wow. So this came way later. So, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, PBS had new programming. Irene Cara was apparently on Electric Company too. I did not know that. Kipper just put that in the chat. Shout out to Kipper Jones, who's over on YouTube, if y'all are wondering why y'all didn't see that on Facebook. But Ghost Rider. Who in the chat remembers Ghost Rider? So that was a group of like preteens, or like at least right in teen, right?
Tweens,
and yeah, they were like tweens, and they would solve mysteries because they had a ghost that would write them messages to help them solve like different issues. So Ghost Rider would help the teens solve these things. So yeah, that I once again, to your point, shout out to PBS. I don't think there is a day that went by that I did not watch Mr. Rogers go into that closet and switch into, and zip up his sweater and sit down and talk to us as young people. Fond memories.
Very fond memories. That a lot. Just being taught, you don't even know you're being taught how to regulate your emotions as a child, and how to switch gears just by him changing his sweater and changing his sneakers. You're teaching kids that it's time to switch gears. It's time to move on to transition to something else, which is a very important lesson to learn. And for my Gen Zs and my millennials, it's something very sad happened, the creator of the Backyardigans, Janice Burgess, who was a Black woman, passed away at the age of 72, but she created the Backyardigans, which was in that same lineage of a Sesame Street and Gullah Gullah Island. That programming created for children specifically to teach them life lessons and to create worlds. So as we talk about Sesame Street, we also want to speak Miss Burgess's name, who passed away at the age of 72, for creating the Backyardigans, which I know resonates with a lot of millennials who grew up. They didn't necessarily have 3-2-1 contact like me and you, Gen Xers, but definitely, shout out to her for creating that world. And we've created a world over here on Q Points, J Ray. We've created a community.
Yes.
And we put out a call to our community, and we asked them a specific question. We asked our Q Points community, we asked you, what lessons have adults forgotten from Sesame Street that can make us better humans? What lessons have adults forgotten from Sesame Street that can make us better humans? And J Ray, the Q Points fam did not disappoint, and I believe we have a special clip that features a very special narration by a very special voiceover actor. Well, let's check that out, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Yo, thank y'all so much for hanging with us. Let's watch this video. We'll be right back. This week on Q Points, we asked, what lessons have adults forgotten from Sesame Street that could make us better humans? Here's what the adults had to say.
What's up, Q Points? This is Girlie B. So I believe that what adults are missing from today that we were learning on Sesame Street is kindness. And that's what is really missing in the world is kindness. And Sesame Street was the vehicle to learn about kindness. And I believe that's what adults today are missing.
A Fly Girl's World writes, Sesame Street characters demonstrated kindness and respect towards one another, even though they all had differences. As a child watching Sesame Street, I learned that everyone in the community or neighborhood had a role, and each participant was important. I miss Olivia and Mr. Hooper's store. I thought it was cool when Maria and Luis got together. Oscar the Grouch is one of my favorites. He taught us how to deal with grumpy people, and also you could speak your mind and still be loved by those who understood you at your core. I also love the introduction of new characters in the latter years. Don't know where I would be without this life-enriching show.
Hi, Q fam. I'm Tony Kennedy, the writer and creator of What's Poppin' Penny podcast. And today I've been asked by you, what lessons have adults forgotten from Sesame Street that can make us better humans? I love this question because I love humanity. And my answer to this question is the lesson that we should remember is the untold value of following our empathetic heart. When we see someone who is down, when we see someone who is struggling, and we don't have a close relationship with that person, that shouldn't stop us from following our empathetic heart and talking to that person, or better yet, listening to what's going on with that person and sharing our vibe with them in order to raise them up.
There's one particular lesson from Sesame Street that adults have forgotten, which is respect others, even if they're different. Think different, live different, talk different, respect them because you may need that person, those people later on down the road, you know, and it's a lot of respect that's not given in these days and times because everybody is all about canceling somebody. You know, if something that you don't understand, you like, no. But, you know, respect them regardless.
Professor MCJ writes, "Good morning, Q Points family. I hope all is well. To answer this week's question, I would say to be your unique self. One of the great things about Sesame Street is that it was full of different and unique characters. No two characters looked the same or had the same journey. I think as adults, we often compare ourselves to others and try to emulate their lives. We have to remember that our journey is our journey, and it does not make us any less important. I believe that the thief of comparison steals our joy and leads to unnecessary and unwanted stress. So, as adults, I encourage us to embrace our full selves and our individual journeys. And in doing so, be intentional about extending grace to ourselves when things don't go as planned, as it is all a part of the journey. Thank you, Matthew."
What's going on, Q Points family? One of the lessons that I learned as a kid from watching Sesame Street was to always have manners, to be polite, to extend kindness. Please and thank you, may I, good morning, goodbye, hello, those type of pleasantries. I think that's a lost art via texting, emails, just seeing people. There's just no politeness, there's no kindness, there's none of that. And so I hope that's something that I continue to carry on as an adult, because that was the one trait I did learn as a kid watching Sesame Street. Hope to see more of that now.
Thank you so much to all of the adults who responded to our question. We hope that the lessons from Sesame Street can teach us a lot about life, and we thank you for always tuning into Q Points. Peace. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in for that video. Sir Daniel, what did you think?
Listen, I am beyond thankful to our Q Points family. Like, you guys really showed up and responded. Your responses were perfect. I was thinking when we first came up with the question, what lessons have adults forgotten from Sesame Street that can make us better humans? Um, Immediately I thought of empathy, and everybody had the same response. It's learn Sesame Street was a mirror. It was a mirror that was held up to us to see not only ourselves but to see each other.
Yep.
And we have, woo boy, we have strayed way long and far away from Sesame Street. I don't even know if anybody could tell me how to get to Sesame Street. No, you can tell me. But there's a lot of people that have forgotten. And when we say forgotten to how to find Sesame Street, Sesame Street is a place in your heart.
Yes.
Sesame Street resonates in your heart and a place in your psyche where you learn how empathy. That's what it boils down to, is that empathy that we are all missing and have kind of learned to forget. And that's why it's so easy to go on these social media tirades. It's so easy to decry, talk bad about immigrants, to be running on a platform as big as the presidency and to say the craziest things. And it's just nonsense that we're living in now. And I really, according to, thank you to Kipper Jones, who is in the chat, who mentioned that the government, specifically the GOP, is trying to defund PBS, but with the insidious intention of destroying the harmony that programs like Sesame Street created. And so yeah, but before we go any further, I was talking about different programs, J Ray. Remember Romper Room?
I loved Romper Room. Yes.
Romper Room was so dope, but you know what, J Ray, I would always be sad at the end because she never said my name. I don't know if there was never for those who don't know my
The
name, my
camera
first name is
didn't.
Adrian.
You like you can see me.
You see me. I know you see me. There has to be other Adrians in the world, and she never ever said Adrian, and that used to have me a little bit distraught. But back to our topic of Sesame Street. What for you, J Ray? What kind of sticks with you when that question came up about lessons learned from Sesame Street?
I think this goes directly to Sesame Street showed us the importance of difference, and I think that helped us to make better connections with folks. So one of the things that Matthew mentioned in his response that resonated with me so much is because no one or no thing, on Sesame Street kind of looked the same. They kind of existed in their own worlds and were different, but could still exist at Sesame Street, right? And so I feel like the lesson that we have forgotten, and Kipper says this all the time at the end of his shows, is that as humans we have to remember that we are more alike than we are different. And I think Sesame Street, for me, when I think about how Sesame Street helped us make better connections with both, adults and children, is just that understanding that our difference doesn't change our sameness, right? And it's our sameness that really unite us. So, yeah, grateful. I see that Wani Lovett just joined. I'm so sorry that YouTube wasn't letting her chat, but she brought in the comment after she switched over to Facebook, I love, 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 and most agree that kindness is missing. So thank you so much, Wani, for moving from YouTube to Facebook to be with us tonight. But yeah, so for me, that's what I mentioned, what I remember, Sir Daniel. And I'm curious for you now, because music is foundational to Sesame Street. These lessons that we learned were often delivered to us through music. So let's talk about that for a second. So we of course have mentioned Luther Vandross is one of the early for season 1 had Luther. Season 1 has Luther on it, that sets the stage for everything else.
That's legendary. Come on.
So
Luther Vandross and but no, go ahead, continue.
No, I was just going to say, so who are some musicians that you remember or some of your favorite performances from Sesame Street? I'm curious. One or two.
Okay, so off bat, I remember, and I was much older. I was way out of the watching Sesame Street age range when this particular performance came on. But I remember distinctly when En Vogue was at the height of their superpowers. I think this might have been around the first album. And they were on Sesame Street, and I don't remember how I came across it, but I saw it. And they were singing a song called Adventure. And I remember this plainly. They were singing a song about let's have an adventure and about imagination and going to different places and different countries. And the video montage, I'll never forget, that accompanied it was just so dope because En Vogue, of course, was known for their vocal ability and not being shy about showing their vocal ability. Definitely sang, and it was singing live on their Sesame Street performance. But another performance that stood out for me is one of the first rap artists that I ever saw on Sesame Street was Queen Latifah. And of course she was busting a rhyme. I can't remember which Muppet she was with, but she was rhyming with somebody on Sesame Street. So those two stand out to me. Who do you have on your list?
So one I just discovered in researching for the show, but one I remember from when I was a kid. So fact, if you don't know, I think I've said it on this show before. Diana Ross is kind of like my barometer for like my entry barometer for like divas. It's my obviously gay trait is I loved Diana Ross as a kid. my OGT is
Your
Diana
OGT.
Ross. So in 1982, so this is after Why Do Fools Fall in Love? This is the Why Do Fools Fall in Love era. So Mirror, Mirror era. Diana. She appears on Sesame Street. And I remember she did Picture a World. Like it was, and the kids had to do the motion. So Diana, she
Yes.
wasn't, right. She wasn't with, and that's a very Diana kind of motion to do, right? So she wasn't with a Muppet. I only remembered that she was wearing red and there was like a lot of kids. But so I went and I found the video. As it turns out, Chutney is sitting in between. I'm sure Chutney was probably like nervous and like, I don't want to go nowhere else. So Chutney is moving around and doing the thing. Tracy is right next to Diana with these glasses on. Like her glasses is like our size on like a child, on like a child. And Miss Rhonda is holding court. I didn't even know this at the time, right? So you see Rhonda holding court. She's like the biggest kid there. So it's like the two older children are at the top, and Diana's at the center, surrounded by all of the, a multicultural group of children telling them to picture a world. And it is, fun fact, by the way, the composers for Sesame Street had to produce songs for 130 episodes a year. That's a lot of it was somewhere it's a lot of work. I think I read that they were doing like 2,000 compositions a year. It's a lot of compositions.
Man.
And working with stars in some of them, right? So one is Diana Ross. Picture a World, where Diana's doing her Diana thing. As I was researching though, I was like, who's contemporary? And child Janelle Monae came through. So this is first Bad Boy album, Janelle. So the Archangel with the booth.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's with Bert. So Bert is trying to sing. And of course, Bert doesn't know the lyrics yet. So Janelle is singing this song called The Power of Yet. And let me tell y'all how this song got me together as an adult this week. Because what The Power of Yet is talking about is oftentimes we are thinking that something needs to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen or won't happen. It hasn't happened yet. And that's the power of yet, right?
Jerry, that's a sermon right there, because you ministering right now. We might need to pass
thinking
around
about
a
cue
collection
points,
plate.
right? Because when we talk about cue points, and I was thinking about it even for the work that we do very specifically, where it's like, we haven't done this and we haven't gotten that. We don't have 1 million downloads yet. We don't have 1 million downloads yet. That's the power of
Amen,
yet.
somebody. The power of yet. Amen. Turn to your neighbor and say the power of yet. Please. Hello, somebody. That's powerful, J-Ray. That is very powerful. And Sesame Street. Sesame Street was ministering to us and still ministering to us, and we don't even know it.
Yes.
So yes, you're welcome. You're welcome, Q Points listeners, for bringing all of this up to the forefront. And so we cannot talk Sesame Street and not talk about our favorite characters. And just off the top of my head, who resonated with me a lot, and I mean because he was the breakout star, but Big Bird. Big Bird resonated on a physical level with me because I was always taller than all the other kids. And so a lot of them resorted to calling me Big Bird because I was taller than them. And there was a Big Bird, of course, was created to as a child. Like Big Bird chronologically was like 4 years old, so he resonated with us because he was learning a lot. He was learning about himself. He was learning about the being different from everybody else, and those things still resonate with me. I love Mr. Snuffleupagus. Mr. Snuffleupagus was imaginary.
Yes. I did
I was
not know
always
that for years.
he Big Bird was the only one that could see Mr. Snuffleupagus, and that was a huge I remember that was like a 2-part episode of why people couldn't see Mr. Snuffleupagus and the importance of children's imaginations and how it's
Yes.
okay. And as an only child, that resonated with me as well because as an only child, you have to play by yourself and you create worlds, you create imaginary friends to play with, or you have and what imaginary friends basically is inner dialogue. And
Yes.
that those people that can carry on inner dialogue are known to be more highly intelligent.
Yep.
People that can do that can have a dialogue with themselves. And of course I love Grover. Grover was blue, and so misunderstood, kind of awkward. I resonated that he resonated with me a lot as well. Who for you?
So it's funny. So for one, Grover. It's so funny.
Uh-huh.
So all the characters that I resonated with the most are kind of built from the same cloth. So everybody I'm going to mention is kind of like the same character in a different version. So Grover, for one, the voice. Right. The voice for Grover, but also kind of his shyness. Grover was kind of like a shy character, which I really resonated with. Even though people don't know that, this, and I think people who know me well, I'm an introvert when I get around a bunch of folks. I'm real good one-on-one, child. Listen. But don't get me around a group. Anyway, Grover. I love Oscar the Grouch.
Same.
He lived in that trash can. He would come up out of that. He was grumpy. He wanted you to be quiet. Okay. I just liked him.
Isn't it? But listen, shout out to Oscar the Grouch because quite a few of us have turned into Oscar the Grouch as we get older.
Yes.
God knows I love my quiet. And when people are disturbing my peace, I pop up and I have a unibrow like Oscar the Grouch, and I'm looking like, what the hell is going on? Part of my language. I know we talking Sesame Street.
Yes.
But yes, Oscar kept it real. Thank you, Jason. Oscar definitely kept it real. And did you have any other
I have
characters?
one shout out to my line brother, Jason. Thank you for joining, man. And my last character is my fun character. I love the Cookie Monster. The Cookie Monster was unhinged. He was unhinged. He was into cookies, kids. If you don't know what the Cookie Monster was into, it's in his name. And once again, when you start talking about like the power of imagination, just to kind of have a character that's just kind of like, this character does one thing.
Yes.
One cookie. It was like really about these cookies, kids.
I mean, you talking about somebody that you find out what somebody's I guess what you could use as bargaining chips for kids, because that's important for children too, is learning what they like and what you can use to barter with children, because sometimes you got to barter with kids. And cookies was definitely, yes, Cookie Monster's thing. We can't not talk about Elmo.
We have to, even though we were way older when Elmo came. Elmo changed the game.
Elmo was a bona fide. He might have been. Is he? No, because Kermit is still like the number one superstar, breakout star in all Muppet fandom. But Elmo is right there. Elmo is close. And then when we found out Elmo was voiced by a black man,
yep,
that made even all the more, difference to us. But
Mm-hmm.
Elmo just had a gravitas at his
Mm-hmm.
very young age. And nowadays, you all have dumped all of your emotions on Elmo, and it's sickening.
And that's
You
so
all have
sad.
y'all
Why
have
y'all do
aggravated
Elmo?
Elmo.
Elmo has been nothing but good to y'all. And y'all got up on Tina Knowles' internets and y'all done told Elmo all your foolishness. Elmo didn't come to the Twitter for that.
At all. But J Ray, okay, before we move on, I gotta share this story. So back in, I think this either had to be like 95 or 96. Elmo was at the height of his superpowers, and Tickle Me Elmo was
Woo!
was the toy
Re-
to have.
remember Tickle Me Elmo.
Tickle Me Elmo was a fun. If you were old enough to remember Cabbage Patch Kids and how much of a craze that
Yeah.
was when you were a kid, Tickle Me Elmo had the same effect on the children of that generation. And so I'll never forget my good friend Angel, she and I, we had to be like 20 and 21. She and I went out to Lenox Mall. For those of you who are familiar with Lenox Mall here in Atlanta, they had KB Toys. Was it KB? Yes.
KB
Or was
Toys.
it
Mhm.
FAO Schwartz?
Oh.
No, it was KB Toy Store. It was KB Toy Stores. This is when there were actual toy stores
Mhm.
in the mall.
Right.
And first of all, do y'all even know what a mall is? Anyway, we'll talk about it
That's a whole
another
other
time.
thing.
That's a whole nother show. So we went to KB Toy Store with the full intent of going to the Tickle Me Elmo display and setting off each and every Tickle Me Elmo at the same
Y'all
time.
are
And
awful.
and at our big ages, we sat there and cracked up listening to all the Tickle Me Elmos just laughing. We sat up there and cracked up and just walked out the store, and Tickle Me Elmos, like 50 of them are having a fit because they would set each other off once they started laughing. And that was like the highlight of our day. We went there specifically to set off the Tickle Me Elmos.
Okay, so one, it looks like Mark McPherson did the same thing. Y'all are a mess. Y'all are a mess torturing them
Great
people that worked.
minds.
Them people that worked in the KB was probably like, no, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sure they were sick of it. I'm sure they were
Right.
sick of
Shout out to Joshua Alston, who's cookies in the YouTube. Shout out to Joshua.
it.
So yeah, Elmo was a thing. As we kind of wind down, y'all. So one, thank y'all again for just being here with us. But it makes me wonder, Sir Daniel, or just reflect on
Mhm.
music is so critical to learning. And I don't know what my life would have been like. One, had I not been exposed to shows like Sesame Street,
Yep.
and Schoolhouse Rock and all these other shows that we've talked about that had music seamlessly interwoven into it. Cause who can forget 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
6,
9,
7, 8, 9,
10,
10,
11,
11,
12.
12. Thank you,
Who
Pointer Sisters.
Thank
Yes.
you, right? So having this music so interwoven made learning easier. Um, and I just don't know what that would be. So I think that having music in learning, music in schools is critical. It's just missing, and the kids absolutely need it because I think it would make a world of difference. Why do you think music is so important in learning?
Well, I mean, it's scientifically proven that music um helps to improve our brain function.
Mhm.
Now when you're talking about children, music it increases the shooting off of the synapses in
Mhm.
our brains that information travels through, and our frontal lobes are developing at that time, so music is there to help that along and help us along in making more executive decisions as our frontal lobes develop. And so music is definitely, like I said, scientifically proven to help that, and to create rhythmic ways of us learning things. You know, you learn, your ABCs are taught to you in a rhythm. You know, the pinball machine
Yeah.
song with the Pointer Sisters, that's done in a rhythm. And guess what? You remember each and every single one of those things, and they're imprinted in our brains. I think to this, they're using music now as a means to help people with dementia and Alzheimer's, because music, there's something about music that even in that state where your mind functions are deteriorating at that age, music helps unlock those memories, or gives comfort. So we cannot, as Q Points podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history, we have to wave the banner of music and the importance of music when it comes to learning. As you go vote,
Yes.
please keep these things in mind. You know, as we go vote, and voting on a local level
School
for,
boards
you
and
know,
all of
it's
that.
so important about what happens in your schools. You know, there's teachers and education, books, they're all at stake now in this election year. And there are real forces that are making real efforts to help remove those things, because they realize that an imaginative mind is a powerful thing. And when somebody has imagination and can read, you are not, you question things, and you are
Yes.
not a slave to other people, to what people want you to believe. And so that's the crux of what they're trying to take away from us. So keep that in mind as as you go along, you listen to this podcast. Hopefully you're on your way to the voting polls and you make your decision about what you want for, if you're bringing children into this world, what do you want for your children? Who do you want your children to be? If you want your children to be good human beings, if you want your children to be able to talk to you and relate to you as a human being, because Jerry, a lot of kids are missing that component. I don't want to get off on this too quick, but you saw the thing that happened with Cam Newton, and how and the young people that were fighting him at his own football camp.
Right.
There had been videos of children disrespecting Cam before in the past. We've seen videos of children disrespecting Cat Williams. Because there's a disconnect, I believe there's a disconnect in how a lot of children see the adults in their lives, and that's because we're not treating each other like human beings. So then what we as adults look at as disrespect is actually a breakdown in children believing that we are actually both human beings and deserve respect and empathy for each other. And so I think as we wrap up this episode,
That's a mic drop first, Sir Daniel. Sir Daniel just mic dropped. I'll have nothing to add to that.
well, yes, you do, because we got to tell all the fine people that are watching, and we love you. Shout out to that librarian. His name is Michael. He's been all over the social media. People like him. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't know this. I have to.
He was a librarian. He left the library to go work for PBS, as a matter of fact. And he became very famous on social media and infamous at the same time, because there were some people who just couldn't believe that somebody would exude such kindness and happiness for reading and for learning and for and people as human beings. So there were people that would start attacking him and his character, and of course, that led to other things. But he is now working for PBS, which is great. So that means that PBS is continuing to do great work and do great things for us and our listeners and our listeners' children. And so what I want J Ray to do is to talk to all the fine people that are watching us right now. If you've never watched Q Points before, because I think there's a lot of brand new people here, tell them, J Ray, what they need to do from here on out.
Yo, so check it. So first of all, if you love interesting conversations about music history, you are in the right place. If you love having conversations about Black music and Black culture in a way that is loving, and we do our best to not tear folks down and give you poor information. If you like folks that do that, you're in the right place. If you at any point saw Video Soul or Video LP or Yo MTV Raps the weekday or the weekend, you are in the right place. Okay, so thank you for being here with us and tuning in. Wherever you are tuning in from, subscribe. If they have a notification bell, do that too. It's really helpful. Also, share the show with folks. Let folks know that you watched. Let folks know that you had a good time. And definitely go ahead and listen to Q Points. We are a podcast that is absolutely everywhere. If there's a podcast platform, we're on it. And drop us a review. We love 5-star reviews. We love them. So you can leave us one and leave us a comment. We read comments. We put them on our social media. It's awesome. So do that. That's absolutely free. Follow our newsletter at magazine.qpoints.com. That's one step further. That's also free, but it gives you some additional information. And you could also visit our store at store.qpoints.com and buy you some fresh gear from Q Points. I wish I had like a mug or one of my hoodies around, but I don't.
I got my buttons.
You got your
I
button?
just got my
We got
buttons.
buttons now, y'all. So you can
Here's
order
one of
buttons.
them.
See? So
And
slow
that's from
jams can
our
heal
Slow
us.
Jams
button.
Can heal us. So yes.
Yes, please get some merch. And yeah, all the things. But thank y'all for just being here. Thank y'all for rocking with us. We have surpassed 15,000 downloads, and we can't wait to just keep delivering this. Yo, we did that, Sir Daniel. We high five, bro.
High five. Yes, we did. We did. Thank you for those 15,000. And here's to 15,000 more. But J. Ray, what do I always say in this life? You have an opportunity. You can either pick up the needle or you can let the record play. I'm DJ Sir Daniel.
I am J. Ray.
And this has been Q Points Podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history. We will see you on the next go round. Bye.
Bye.